So glad that Jeff took that approach to his devotion for us today, because I really wanted to focus and start on talking about the great Christian education stories that are out there. And I have a similar story, and it's not going to be like Jeff's, which is wonderful. But before we get into the grant presentation process portion of this morning, I wanted to share a personal story, an education story. This is my father, and that is not a dog in front of him. That's a lamb. And like many of us, my father has a very interesting Christian education story I wanted to share with you. Dad grew up in the Depression, and this is in rural Idaho, Clover, Idaho, outside of Twin Falls. And Dad grew up in this on this farm and went to a Lutheran grade school there in Clover, Idaho. There's a church. There's a parking lot, there's a school across the street, and that's all there is to Clover, Idaho. It was a one-room school. So Dad said that in his one-room school, he got to practice being a teacher every day, because the older students would teach the younger students. Two stories about Dad's 8th grade year that I just love. 8th grade year, last year at Clover. It was getting close to graduation time. And there was the teacher, and there was the principal there. And the teacher, they were getting ready for graduation, and the teacher brought my grandfather in and said, "We have a problem. Edmund never completed 3rd grade. We mistracked some of the records. And for some reason, he's really not in 8th grade, he's in 7th grade. But I think he's prepared, he can graduate anyway." Dad always joked that later in life he married a 3rd grade teacher to make up for it. Similar story, 8th grade year. Dad was taken to the school building. And my grandfather was there, and he said, "Edmund, you need to sit here. I need to talk with Herr Pastor." My grandfather came from Germany, and they spoke German in the home. Between the 2 world wars, they got out of Germany, seeing stuff that was coming. So they spoke a lot of German in the home, and Dad still speaks German quite fluently. So they went into the behind closed doors, and then my grandfather came out and says, "Edmund, come in. We need to talk to you." Just a little background. Here they are in a rural farm community. Dad was the youngest of 4. One brother was off to war at this time, dropping bombs on relatives in Germany. The other brother was the oldest, and he was working on the farm, had an exemption from World War II. Dad wasn't old enough yet, in 8th grade, but Dad started developing horrible hay fever. He could not work on the farm. Every fall his eyes would water, he would sneeze, he was useless. And that's the reason for this meeting. They sat down with the pastor and the teacher and my grandfather, and they announced to my father and said, "Edmund, you're not able to work on the farm your life, so we are giving you back to the Lord. You are going to Portland Lutheran boarding school next year, and you will become a Lutheran teacher or a Lutheran pastor." And that's what he did. Dad became a teacher, a principal. He later became a professor of music at Concordia, Nebraska, and served many years there, directing choir and touring the world. But Dad wasn't finished when he retired from Concordia. There's another Christian education story that took place even in his retirement. because Dad and Mom, after they left Seward, they moved to Lincoln. They wanted to stay active and involved in their retirement years. So they started teaching English as a second language to immigrant families in Lincoln, Nebraska. Mom taught Afghani women English because it had to be woman to woman. And there's a very large Afghani population in Lincoln, Nebraska. Dad, because of his German background, they weren't German immigrants anymore, I guess. But because it's similar to French, Dad taught Congolese immigrants because they speak French in Congo. And Mom and Dad were working for the Lincoln Literacy Foundation, but they thought, we'll use our own materials. We're going to use Luther's Small Catechism to teach English. And we're going to give these students an opportunity to practice their language skills by taking them to Bible study in church. And this Lincoln, Nebraska Lutheran congregation went from being monochromatic to multiracial in 10 years. It's amazing. There are many Lutheran education stories out there. There's many things going on. But I want you to see and think about how education has affected your life. Whether it's the Lutheran day school education, whether it's an education program like English as a second language. These are the kinds of things that the To All Generations campaign wants to support. Now, what is To All Generations? To All Generations is a campaign that was started as a dream of our district president, Dean Addisty. He talked to us among our staff and said, we have a problem right now that we're not using these Christian education agencies like we once did in our history of our church. We have schools that are struggling. He goes all over the state and he preaches in all over the state, and he's amazed at the number of congregations that don't have Bible study going on, or if there is, so very underattended. Yet we have such a strong education history. He wanted to do something about it. So, going back about 3 years, at the district convention, the last district convention, a resolution was passed that said, let's study if we could do a district-wide campaign to support education in all its forms. There were like 7 initiatives originally in the feasibility study. We'll do this test and see, do we have a case for this? Is this something that is supportable? So 2 years ago, we started that feasibility study. We talked to hundreds of people across the district. Maybe we talked to some of you in here. We sent out surveys. We went to different locations all across the district and asked questions and came back with a very strong case. Yes, there is a need to do something about education across this district, and there needs to be support for those education programs out there. And that began the To All Generations campaign. 1 year ago, the first week of September, the board of directors approved that we move forward with the campaign. And we have been into the To All Generations campaign since then. I'd like to show you our short video here that gives that perspective. So I know many of you probably have seen that video before, but it's a good summary of what we started with and where we are going with the To All Generations campaign. Where are we at today? Well, the ongoing lead gift phase, which has been going on until this point and will continue in the future, has over $400,000 in gifts and pledges at this point. We would like it to be more, and we hope that that will continue to grow. But we are ecstatic that we have funds and there is support out there to do this campaign and to make education thrive in Minnesota. That money is not like a capital campaign that a church goes through. Any dollar that is brought in, we want to be able to support these Christian aid agencies. And so we have achieved our goal, and we have raised money for this campaign, so that's exciting. We had 4 congregations that tested our materials to run the Congregational Man campaign. They did this past spring. And they gave us great feedback on the campaign and how well that runs in the congregational setting. And we now have 15 congregations that are sharing the To All Generations story with their members this fall. We are looking for more congregations to share the To All Generations story either this coming winter or next spring. So that's where the campaign is right now. You saw in the video that there's 3 initiatives. The first one is strengthening education ministries. The second one is developing unified marketing strategies. And the third one is increasing efforts towards parental choice in education. All the dollars that come in are going towards those things. Now, the first 2, and primarily the first one, strengthening education ministries, is what we're here to talk about for the rest of today. We have a process in place that we want to share with you that takes these dollars that are coming in and puts it into ministry and puts it into practical use through grants. And I'd like to share with you today how you can write a grant, the process for writing a grant, the criteria that's used in the granting process, tell you a little bit about the granting committee, so that you know what you need to do to help your education ministry do something new, something exciting, something bold, like some of the presentations that were shared this morning. So the purpose of these TAG grants is it's seed money to start something new or greatly enhance what is currently going on in your education ministry. And when I say education ministry, please know, I'm talking school, I'm also talking parish. This could be a grade school thing. This could be a English as a second language program you want to establish. It could be all kinds of different education platforms. And it's a very broad term when we use it here. The hope is that the grants will cause an increase in mission focus and energy to propel an entire ministry to new levels. We're not saving any of these dollars for later. The needs are now. There are great ideas out there, and let's get these things going and moving. Grants can also be awarded for marketing of education ministries, as in the second initiative that was shared with you. In your packet, you have 2 printouts of the grant applications. You might want to refer to those. There's a short form and there's a long form. And believe it or not, that is the short form and the long form printed up there, and they're exactly alike, except for maybe a couple words at the top. Okay? The short form is for grant requests that are under $5,000. The long form is for $5,000 or more requests. It takes place in the second and third pages where the differences are, rather than in that first page. Now that is printed for you so you know all the questions that are in the application process. But that is not what you're going to turn in if you're going to write a grant. All grants are going to be submitted through our website. The web address is here, and we're going to post this presentation and PowerPoint and information on our website in the next week. Right, Billy? Yeah, I got the thumbs up. Good. The first grant deadline is October 26, 2017. if you want to be considered in the first round of grant requests, has to be submitted online by that date. Okay? After that time, not all the money is immediately available. Not all the money will be dispersed at that first granting period. Every 6 months after that point, as long as there's funds available, we will continue to consider grants and award until all funds are out. Okay? So, the first page of both of those forms is to be completed by every partner in the granting process. We believe one of the strengths of our To All Generations campaign is the strengths of education entities working together. And by working together, there's an efficiency that can take place. Let me give you an example. I was talking with one of our principals in August who wants to write a grant. He was very intrigued by creative education. If you were here for the presentation earlier that Corey Nelson gave, that's where this principal is in. He has a whole classroom that they're converting to a creative space. He wants to put together some of the very things that Corey told us about. He'd love to put some drones together, some robotics together, some Lego robotics, all these different kinds of pieces. He also wants to get into creating in the artistic sense. But his thought is, I don't have funding sources to do all these things. I want to partner with 4 other schools so that we can get the materials together and then share the materials amongst all 4 schools. And by the way, I'd really like those 4 schools to be in our athletic association so that our coaches can be the ones, when they go to the away games, can carry the materials on to the next school. He's really thinking advanced here. Okay. So now we have 4 schools getting one set of materials to share rather than 4 schools working independently. There's a lot of strength in working together and why there's a collaborative nature to the granting process. I understand not every grant's going to work that way, but we believe that there's strength in that. So, in the grant application, that first page needs to be completed by every congregation, school, RSO, whatever agency that is participating in the process. Okay? Here are the questions of the narrative section that's on the second page of the short form. I'm just going to go through them. You can read them on your own. Describe your project and how grant money would be utilized for the success of the project. Basic question. What are the needs or issues to be addressed by this grant proposal? Why is this issue important? Be specific. Provide citations when referencing data and information from other sources. We want to know what are you trying to solve with this grant? What problem are you trying to solve? 3, who will be served by this grant? Describe who the recipients of this grant are. Who's going to benefit if you get this money? How many do you anticipate will be served? Is it going to be 10 kids in a confirmation class? Is it going to be 30 kids across 4 different congregations that want to partner together with a youth minister? We want to know what those numbers are and what you anticipate. 4, describe the key staff and or volunteers that will ensure the success of this program. Please provide the names of these staff people if they are currently on staff. If not currently on staff, please provide the qualifications needed for those positions. We want to get an understanding of what's the leadership potential to get this accomplished. Do you have people now who are going to do this? Do you have to recruit those people as part of the granting process? So that's the 4th question. And the 5th one, what is the desired timeline for the implementation of this grant? Okay? That's the short form. Long form adds 6 more questions to that. What activities do you intend to engage in or provide to achieve the desired change in people's lives? Describe how this project will be sustainable after the grant dollars are expended. That's when we're considering as a district and as ministries, we want to make sure that the grant dollars are not just a temporary fix and then the problem returns once the grant is gone. Okay, so that's why we asked that question. How does this request fit into your organization's mission statement? What tools and processes will you use to measure the success of the goals and outcomes? How will the evaluation results be used to inform and strengthen future programming and organization operations? And 11, if the grant is accepted, how will the success of the challenge of this project be shared with other? Hear those success stories, and we hope that we'll be able to share those success stories as these grants go out so that other ministries can benefit from it as well. The Schools and Commission Ministers Committee of the District Board of Directors is the committee that will be looking at all grant applications. That committee was chosen for a number of reasons. First, it is a connection to the District Board of Directors, and they were the ones who authorized this process. Secondly, this is a diverse group, at least in Lutheran circles, it's considered a diverse group, in that there are a wide variety of different kinds of ministry positions within this committee. There's a pastor, there's elementary administrators, there's early childhood, there's a DCE, there's a teacher, there's 2 members of the board of directors, and there's a district staff person. So we kind of get a little bit from a wide variety of cross-section of ministries in the district. We also think it's good that the committee was chosen before the membership of the committee was chosen before the grant process was added to their plate. So they're not people who have a particular cause or reason to be on this committee. So we hope that they're a little more impartial because of that. And then to ensure integrity, we say that committee members cannot vote on grant proposals when they're part of the ministry that is requesting the funds. And I think that's fair. Also in your packet, you have a form that looks like this. It's the To All Generations grant review process. This is the District Board of Directors approved document that committee has to work with when looking at these applications. Okay, you can refer to that as we go through, but you can take that with you and look at it as well later. This is what qualifies eligible grants. First of all, it must include methods to reaching people with the good news of Christ. Sowing the seed, as Jeff said earlier. Secondly, there has to be an education component to the request. Not necessarily formal education as in school, but there is a teaching, learning component involved in there. Fourth, brick and mortar, in other words, building programs, infrastructure, building maintenance, improvements, those types of things are not part of this grant at all. There's different kinds of campaign approaches that would be much more effective if that's what you need to do. This is about improving the education programs and not the buildings. And finally, there's an intentional thought here that these grants are not to balance budgets. They're not to help out if you have a little bit of a shortfall this year or to prevent you from cutting a staff member. The idea is, because those are Band-Aids, the idea is let's do something new, something different, something bold that will take the ministry in a different direction that has a chance to continue once the grant dollars are gone. We're very firm that these grant dollars are not going to be used to delay something that's going to take place anyway. We want to change the direction of a ministry if they are having difficulty. All right, ranking criteria. This is the process. So, let's say we get 30 grants that come in October on that deadline, and the grant committee is going to take a look at all those different grants. They're going to take those grants and they are going to make sure, first of all, that they fit the eligibility of the granting process, and then they're going to take them and they're going to rank those grants in order of these criteria. This, if you've ever done grants before, this is the formula you need to use to decide how likely is my project, or how can I make my project fit so it's more likely to be approved. So first of all, the committee's going to look at the number of people impacted per dollar requested. Simple calculation. If there's a very high dollar amount and a very few people impacted by it, it's probably going to be ranked lower than one of a medium-sized dollar amount that impacts a lot of people. Secondly, collaborative efforts are prioritized over individual efforts, and that's because of that example I gave you earlier, where we believe that there's a strength in working together, in ministries working together, so that funds can be used more efficiently and across many parts of the district and not be focused on one smaller area. Third criteria is an evaluation of the organization's ability to achieve the goals. Is there sufficient leadership and support within that organization to get accomplished what they want to get accomplished with this goal? That's a really tough one to determine, but we'll do our best. Next, the sustainability of the program once the grant ends. We do not, once the dollars are gone, there's no more grants. That could be 2 years down the road, it could be 5 years down the road. We cannot have the availability of money now be dependent on sustaining the idea in the future. So you have to be able to say, how will this help in the future, and continue the future? And finally, the potential for the grant idea to be utilized in other settings. If this is a great idea for Central Lutheran School, let's say, could this be a great idea for another school in another setting? Okay? So that grant committee will inform all the members, all the people who are requesting grants, will inform them, is the idea approved, or funded in other words? Is the grant acceptable, but there's no dollars at this time, because we can only put dollars out that we have coming in. And then we'll let them know their rank. Here's what I mean by that. Let's say the first 10 grants that are ranked are approved. Then the 11th idea is a great idea. There's not funds for it right now. That organization is told, your idea is a great idea. It's acceptable under the grant parameters. You are the first one in line right now once there's dollars available. We highly recommend you resubmit in 6 months because of that. That doesn't mean that rank is going to continue 6 months later, because there could be many other great ideas that come in 6 months later. But at least it gives the grant requester an idea of where they stand and how powerful the idea is in the committee's minds. And if you resubmit in 6 months later, maybe you can tweak it and work on it and make it a better idea even. Your grant requester will also be told if there's something incomplete about the grant, or if it's ineligible according to the criteria and why. Okay, so that's all spelled out in that handout. Yeah, and unfunded grants may be resubmitted in future granting periods. One other stipulation, the board of directors has made it part of the process that any grants over $25,000 has to be approved by them. The grant request time periods are set up so that it's within 30 days of when the board of directors meet, so that we would be able to tell ministries within about 30 days of the grant deadlines of when of the grant status. All right? Those education agencies, ministries that are approved for grants have a few responsibilities that are expected of them if they receive funds. They have to provide regular updates on the progress of the grants as it moves forward. They have to provide a final report that will be shared with the board of directors and across the district. And they must be willing to share their grant concept idea and success story with other ministries, perhaps at an Ideation summit or something like that in the future. Now, one thing that we learned about the To All Generations process and the going out and finding our supporters out there is we have found out that there are many congregations that feel they see the value of the To All Generations campaign, but they feel that they have immediate needs right now in their own congregation that they need to take care of first before they can think broader and outside of themselves. That's a natural thing to think about and to go in that direction, I understand. So we added a new piece to this entire process, and we sent that information out last week, I believe it was, a week ago, just over. And that's this. When donors, first of all, when a congregation has an idea that is grantable, or a school, or any education, or any ministry has an idea that's grantable, and they run a campaign with our office, with our consultant, whereby the To All Generations campaign story is shared with the congregation, the ministry will be guaranteed that money will be applied to the local grant. So if you have a local need, we can help you, and the To All Generations campaign can help you and your congregation meet that need without going through all the steps of the grant, of the approval process and the ranking process. Gifts that are designated by donors then will go into that local grant. Gifts not designated by the donors of that congregation will be used to fund all three of the initiatives. And the ministry gets the benefit of the To All Generations tools and training. Let's take a look at what this looks like. Let's say a church applies for a $10,000 grant, maybe in partnership with a bunch of others. That's all within that first initiative, Strengthening Education Ministries. The church shares the To All Generation story and the grant story with the members. So you share the story over 3 weeks. We have materials, bulletin inserts, handouts, letters, presentations that your congregation or your school family could share with your community about To All Generations, and at the same time you can tell them about the local granting need. You'll be trained on how to do that. You'll have the resources given to you to be able to do that as well. So let's say this campaign runs and donors designate $8,000 for To All Generations Grant Initiative A, and $1,000 is undesignated, just given into the general pot, just to throw numbers out. that church will have $8,000 of the local grant funded. That's not quite enough. So they are able to at least move forward with the local help and support of the To All Generations campaign process. The grant review committee then now has an easier question. It's not a question if there's $8,000 available to get this grant funded. It's $2,000 to get this grant fully funded, or whatever amount the shortfall is. At the same time, we believe that the story of To All Generations gets out to more people, and that there are people who might definitely want to support the local ministry, but might also want to support the marketing aspect of the grant idea. Or they might want to support the opportunity for choice in education in Minnesota and that support part of To All Generations. So you can support your grant idea, and we will help you do that if that's something you would like to do. If you're interested in more information about doing a local campaign, we have training sessions going on, and there's a sheet in your packet again where you can sign up for these training sessions. They're in several locations across the district, so that if you're in the Twin Cities area or if you're in a rural area, we will make it work in these 10 different locations. There's 2 meetings. They're about 2 hours in length each, in November and in January. So you only do one in November and one meeting in January. And you will hear about how you can run the To All Generations campaign in your location and benefit from a local grant initiative if you so desire. Okay. So that is taking place. If that time frame doesn't work for you, our third round of meetings will take place, and you look at the very bottom of this page, the option 3 meetings are in March and in April, if you plan on doing a spring or later spring campaign. Okay? Now, I've thrown a lot of information out to you, and there may be some questions at this point. Questions? Yes, sir.
So, we've got a grant idea.
Yep.
And we want to, but it needs a lot of work. Who
Yep.
do we go to right now?
Probably me. Or I could get you started in maybe some other organizations or places that are talking about the same idea. Before we leave here today, I'm also going to give you all an opportunity to share your ideas with others so that you can start building your own network for the collaborative nature of this. Yep, great question. Others?
Sean, how many grant proposals could you have at a time submitting?
Unlimited. We have not placed any limits. The limit is in the number of dollars available. Yep. Yes?
I'm noticing that on the applications, excuse me, on the one hand, you know, you're asking for collaboration, which is great. But then, you know, this is kind of, you're kind of looking at this as existing entities, whether it's a congregation, school, organization, collaboration. So I guess, like, if we were to bring together different congregations, different schools, would we do the grant application in the name of one of those already existing entities, or do we put together a new entity?
The first page of the grant is to be completed by every organization that wants to participate in the grant. Okay? The second 2 pages is just done once.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Well, so in other words, let's say we've got 5 congregations that are going to work together. You want 5
Of just the first page.
and then
Yep.
oh, okay.
So that That's each individual information, but the grant that they are requesting together becomes the rest of the document.
Oh, it does say that there. Okay, sorry.
Yep, that's great, I'm glad you asked that question, so that's more clear. Jeff?
In the grant review process, you talked about approved. Well, that's simple, it's approved. Acceptable but no funds, that's easy enough. Incomplete application, that's simple, I forgot to put it up for them. Ineligible with reasons provided. What if they are, this would be eligible, but for lack of this or that, you know.
If it's lack of information in the grant, then it's incomplete.
All right, so
Yeah.
with then the granting committee might suggest following ABC in order to make this, shall we say, more acceptable.
More acceptable, but it will have to be the next round and 6 months
Yeah,
later.
But
Because
they,
there won't be time in the 2-week time frame that committee has to get their work done.
right, so it's not, it doesn't come back blind, it comes back with, hey, for the lack of this, it might have been acceptable. So.
You know, if ideas aren't granted but are great ideas, we want to make sure that we let people know, hey, we wish we could support this. We can't help you right now. Go for it. Do something local if you need to. There's limits, you know, I've talked to someone who has an idea for like a $3 million grant, and that's the entire process. We hope to get $3 million for everybody. You know, it's not very likely that one will be a project we can get on board, just because of the size of it. Wish we could. Yeah.
So, you know, one of the things that's new, like a new plan, let's say, okay? So there are dozens of steps that happen before you have concrete information. So if you're doing a plan at school, and let's say the high school, you have feasibility studies, you have projections, all this kind of thing. So I'm wondering, after looking at this, if you have to get through all those studies before you would get to a point that you would be able to do that, and how does that look if you're not? How do you get that concrete information?
Yeah, I know of a congregation that is going to write a grant to do a feasibility study with a professional to tell them if they can do an early childhood center. So that's under that whole area of new ministries. Is it enough money to fund everything they need to eventually go in that direction? No, not maybe a later grant. But for right now, they have a need to figure out, is there a market? Is this a good location to plant an early childhood center? And it's about $5,000 to get that professionally done with the same people who do those studies for the New Horizons and all those others. So they'll get great information. I could see the same thing for a high school idea. Do you need help doing those kinds of feasibility studies, paying for those, requesting grants? So to get those first steps out of the way. Yep.
So in other words, too, if there were some schools that already exist, we're not talking about planting new ones, but want to upgrade their websites or have some help figuring out how to get the word out in their community, and maybe it's 3 schools in southeast Minnesota that do that together. They could band together and then apply for a grant for a marketing expert that might come and work with what they already have, something like that.
That's a great area, a great idea for a regional marketing effort. Yeah, I think maybe the Twin Cities area schools might want to do something together like that as well. Other questions? All right. The last thing we want to do today is, it's on your sheet, I think it's called facilitated collaboration.